They laughed when they said I wasn't in the will. Laughed. Right there in the lawyer's office, like it was some inside joke I wasn't part of. Like I was a fool for ever thinking I'd be remembered, let alone deserve anything. My sister leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and smirked. You? Dad barely spoke to you the last 5 years. And I'll admit, for a second, I believed them. I sat there, staring at the polished table, the untouched glass of water, the thick folder in front of the lawyer. But then the lawyer paused, adjusted his glasses, flipped a page, and stood. His voice was calm, but his words hit like a hammer. Actually, he owns everything now. Let me take you back. Dad was the kind of man who made people nervous when he walked into a room. Quiet power. A business mind that could slice through lies in seconds. He built his empire from nothing. Real estate, car dealerships, even a few silent tech investments no one talked about. He wasn't warm, he wasn't affectionate, but he was sharp, calculated. He remembered everything. Growing up, I was the mistake, the dropout, the rebel with the bad haircut and louder opinions. My sister Rachel? She was the blueprint, Ivy League, internships by sophomore year, worked side by side with Dad in his main office before she could legally rent a car. She knew all his passwords, his schedule, his trusted people. Me? I hadn't been invited to a family dinner in 4 years. The last time I saw Dad alive was at Mom's funeral. He didn't say much, just nodded when I walked past him, didn't speak to me directly. I thought, that's it. Whatever small space I once had in this family, it was gone. So when he died 3 months later, I almost didn't show up to the reading of the will. Rachel called me, her voice sugary sweet. You should come. Closure and all that. I knew that tone. She wanted me there, to watch me not get anything, but something in me said, go. The lawyer's office was high-end, leather chairs, big windows, a conference table that probably cost more than my car. Rachel showed up in head-to-toe black like she was playing a part in a movie. Her husband, Blake, tagged along, silent but smug. He'd always hated me. Probably still does. I sat at the far end, feeling like a stranger at my own family's funeral. The lawyer opened the folder and started reading. Calm, dry voice. All the legal stuff first. The date of the will, the estate summary, the confirmation of Dad's passing. Then he got to the first distribution. To my daughter, Rachel, she straightened. I leave my art collection in the beach house in Cape May. She smiled. To her husband, Blake, he raised an eyebrow. I leave my wine collection in the Porsche 911. More smiles, then silence. I waited for my name. Rachel didn't. She leaned over and whispered, loud enough for the whole room. Guess Dad finally gave up on you. Her laugh was sharp, cold. Blake chuckled too, but the lawyer didn't laugh. Instead, he flipped the page, took off his glasses, stood up, then said loud and clear, and to my son, who learned the hardest lessons, the hardest way, I leave controlling interest in all my companies, full ownership of my primary residence, and executor rights to oversee the estate. Silence. Then a gasp, from Rachel. I blinked. What? The lawyer nodded. Yes, everything else, the business, the properties, the investments, it's all yours. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Rachel looked like she'd been slapped. You can't be serious, she snapped. He hadn't even spoken to him. He cut him off. The lawyer gave a small smile. He never stopped watching, and he never stopped planning. Rachel's chair scraped hard against the floor as she stood. No, she snapped. This has to be a mistake. He would never hand it all over to him. The lawyer didn't flinch. He simply tapped the papers in front of him. It's all here, verified, witnessed, updated 6 months before your father passed. 6 months ago, he could barely walk, Rachel spat. He wasn't thinking clearly. He must have been coerced, pressured, something. Her voice was rising now, her calm, polished mask cracking, but the lawyer stayed steady. He passed 2 mental capacity evaluations before signing the amendment, one from his personal physician, the other from an independent specialist your father personally requested. She turned to me like I'd conjured this with a snap of my fingers. What did you do? Show up one day and beg him for a second chance? I didn't answer, because the truth? I had no idea this was coming either. 6 months ago, I was barely getting by, working night shifts at a mechanic's shop, fixing engines for cash, staying in a studio apartment above a deli that smelled like onions 24/7. I'd assumed Dad had written me off just like everyone else did, but maybe he hadn't. Maybe in the end, he saw more than I thought. The lawyer slid a sealed envelope across the table. Your father also left a personal letter for his son. I stared at it like it might burn me. Rachel scoffed. Unbelievable. Blake, quiet until now, finally leaned forward. You can contest this, he said to her. Challenge the validity. Get the probate court involved. There's no way this holds. The lawyer folded his hands. You're welcome to try, but I suggest you read your father's final instructions before making any rash decisions. Rachel grabbed her bag and stormed out, heels hitting the floor like gunshots. Blake followed, red-faced and silent. I was left alone in that room, the envelope in front of me, the air heavy. I opened it in my car, just one sheet of paper. His handwriting, sharp, clean, the same way he used to sign checks at the kitchen table when I was a kid. If you're reading this, it means I was right. You messed up, a lot. So did I. I should have helped you up instead of turning my back. But I saw what you did this past year. The way you got clean. The way you didn't ask for anything. The way you kept showing up when no one was watching. That's what matters, showing up. So now it's your turn to lead. Not because you're perfect, but because you've earned the scars. You've got the grit. And that's more valuable than any business degree. Don't screw this up, and don't let them steal your spine. Dad. I stared at the letter for a long time, my throat tight, chest hollow. He'd been watching. Even from a distance, he saw me. The days after the reading were chaos. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old friends, reporters, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Rachel tried calling once, then sent a text. You'll regret this. I didn't respond. Lawyers met with me, accountants, advisors. Suddenly, I was at the head of something massive, an empire built by a man who rarely smiled, never apologized, but somehow still believed I could carry it forward. The board of directors didn't know what to make of me. I showed up to my first meeting in the only decent suit I owned, notebook in hand, eyes wide. They expected me to fumble, maybe even quit. Instead, I listened, took notes, asked questions, and most importantly, I didn't pretend to know everything. That first week, I sat across from Dad's longtime CFO, a man named Reynolds. He'd worked with Dad for over 20 years. You're not your father, he said bluntly. I nodded. I know. He paused, then smiled, just barely. Good, that might be your biggest advantage. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Rachel wasn't going to walk away quietly. And something about that last will, about why Dad changed it so late in the game, was still a puzzle. He'd been dying. He knew the clock was ticking. So why me? Why now? What had he seen or discovered that made him shift everything? It started with a phone call at 7:42 a.m. I was on my way to the office, my second week sitting in the chair that used to be Dad's, still trying to figure out how to carry a legacy that felt 2 sizes too big. Mr. Callahan, the voice said. This is Dennis March, your father's former estate attorney. We need to meet. There's something you haven't seen. I pulled over. What do you mean? I've been through everything. A pause. Then, there's a sealed clause. It was added separately, only to be opened under specific circumstances. What kind of circumstances? He hesitated. Let's just say, your sister might have triggered them. I met him in a small office above an old bakery downtown. Not the fancy law firm from the will reading. This place was quiet, tucked away, the kind of spot people forget exists. Probably by design. Dennis looked like he hadn't slept much. Gray suit, coffee-stained tie, sharp eyes. He slid a thick envelope across the table. Your father didn't trust many people, but he did trust systems. This clause was filed with me separately. Not even the firm handling the main estate had access. I stared at the envelope. My name was written on the front in Dad's handwriting. I opened it. Inside were 2 pages and a USB drive. The pages weren't legal language. They were instructions. If Rachel contests the will, open this. If she tries to freeze assets, open this. If she contacts Blake's father for legal support, open this. My eyes widened. That's exactly what she'd done, all of it. I'd heard through the boardroom grapevine that she was trying to delay probate by involving a powerful family attorney from her husband's side. Dad had seen it coming. He'd planned for it. Dennis handed me a laptop. The drive has recordings, conversations, a timeline. He started collecting them the day your mother died. I clicked play. The screen showed a hidden camera feed, Dad in his home office. Rachel was there, standing stiffly across from him. I need access to the trust, she was saying. It's not available yet, Dad replied flatly. You're wasting it on Blake's startup. His father can manage it better. I didn't authorize that transfer. You didn't have to. You left the door open. Her voice was calm, but cold. Another clip. Weeks later. Dad speaking into the camera alone. She's siphoning money. I have records. Blake's involved. If anything happens to me and she tries to claim control, this goes straight to my son. Clip after clip. Emails, voice memos, dates, accounts. I sat there, stunned. Rachel hadn't just expected to inherit everything. She'd already been taking it, while he was still alive, and she assumed he'd never notice. But he had, and he hadn't confronted her directly. Not yet. He'd built a case, a quiet, lethal one. I left the meeting with the evidence in hand and my stomach twisted in knots. That afternoon I called a board session, confidential, mandatory. I showed them the documents, the videos, the forged signatures, the private withdrawals. No one said a word for almost a full minute. Then Reynolds, the CFO, looked at me and nodded slowly. So that's why he chose you. Rachel didn't take it well. She stormed into my office the next morning like she still owned the floor beneath her feet. You think you've won? She hissed. You think this means you're smarter than me? I didn't rise. Didn't yell. I just opened the laptop and pressed play. Her face drained as her own voice filled the room. By the time the 3rd clip ended, she was shaking. I'll ruin you, she whispered. No, I said calmly. You already ruined yourself. She left without another word. That night, I sat in Dad's old office alone. Just me, the city lights beyond the windows, and a desk that felt a little less heavy now. The thing about truth? It doesn't always fix everything, but it clears the path. And finally, I could see what lay ahead. But just as I started to feel steady, another storm rolled in, because there was one name in those documents I hadn't expected to find. My mother's. I almost missed her name. It was buried on page 7 of a supplemental file in the encrypted folder, tucked between ledgers and property titles. A small line, written in Dad's tight, deliberate handwriting. Primary beneficiary, Catherine Callahan Trust, pending full transfer upon conditions met. Catherine Callahan. My mother. She had died nearly a year before Dad, peacefully, quietly, after a long illness. She never talked about the family business, never fought for control, never took sides. She just disappeared into the background of our lives. And when she passed, Dad didn't say much. He paid for everything, gave a short eulogy, then went back to work 2 days later, We thought that was the end of her story, but clearly, it wasn't. I called Dennis again. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me about the trust," I said. "The one in my mother's name." Silence. Then, "You found that, huh?" "Yes. What is it?" A pause. Then he sighed. "Come in. It's better if you see for yourself." Back in his office, Dennis unlocked a small fireproof safe and pulled out a box. Inside were a few legal folders, a black and white photo of my mother in her 20s, and a journal. Worn, with corners folded, her name written on the inside cover in faded ink. He handed it to me gently. "Your father didn't want this released unless someone found the clause. He said if anyone ever cared enough to read that deep, they deserve the truth." I opened the journal with shaking hands. Inside were short entries, snippets of thought, pain, hope, and then a section marked with a paperclip. "I never wanted the money. I only ever wanted peace. But I see now that if I don't act, Rachel will inherit everything and she'll burn it down out of pride. She and Blake are dangerous together, greedy in a way James refuses to be." So I told him. I told James what I saw, what I knew, and he believed me. It hit like a thunderclap. She wasn't blind to what was happening. She had seen Rachel and Blake's schemes, the forged papers, the shady transfers. She had known it all, and she told Dad. In fact, she may have been the reason he started documenting everything. I flipped the page. "If James moves forward with the trust in my name, it won't be to honor me. It will be to protect what's left of the family from being gutted. And if he leaves it to our son, maybe there's still hope." I read that line 3 times. Our son. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. I was the only son. Dennis laid out the rest. The trust had been created secretly after my mother's diagnosis, hidden within a shell foundation, funded slowly through secondary accounts. Nothing illegal, just quiet, invisible, until now. Everything in that trust, real estate, a few offshore accounts, some long-term investment portfolios, was designed to activate under one condition: if Rachel was found to have committed financial misconduct related to the estate, which, thanks to the video files and records I now had, she had. Dennis leaned back, fingers steepled. "It was a backup plan. Your father didn't want to cut her out. He wanted to give her a chance to turn around. But your mother? She knew better." I sat there, my pulse thudding in my ears. "She left it to me," I said quietly. Dennis nodded. "She did. Everything in the trust is now yours. And the minute this goes public, Rachel loses everything else too." I walked out into the daylight, holding that journal like a lifeline. I remembered my mother sitting by the window, reading in silence. Always watching, always listening. And I realized something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. She had believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. But there was one more thread, one last thing that didn't sit right. Because while the trust covered what Mom wanted to protect, it didn't explain why Rachel had gone so far in the first place, why she was willing to lie, steal, forge, just to make sure I got nothing. And I had a feeling the final answer to that wasn't in the documents. It was in the past. Buried, but not forgotten. It was strange, the way silence grows heavier when you're closer to the truth. After uncovering the trust, after reading my mother's words, I thought I finally understood everything. That Dad had left me his empire to protect it, and Mom had created the trust to shield what she could from Rachel's ambition. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. Why had Rachel hated me with such force? Why did she try so hard, not just to get more, but to make sure I got nothing? Hurt is one thing. Hate is something else entirely. I got my answer in a file labeled private, not for probate. It was in a dusty banker's box left behind in the back room of Dad's home office, hidden beneath tax folders and business permits. I don't even know why I opened it. Maybe I was just looking for closure. Instead, I found a birth certificate. Not mine, Rachel's. Except something was off. The father's name was blank. I called Dennis again. He met me after hours at his office, locking the door behind him before I'd even finished explaining. I found her certificate, I said. Dad's name isn't on it. He sighed, heavy, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Your father wasn't Rachel's biological father, he said. He raised her, adopted her when he married your mother, but she never forgave them for keeping it a secret. I sat back, stunned. She found out when she was 16, he continued. Your mother told her during a fight. She thought it was time Rachel knew the truth. But Rachel thought they'd lied to her whole life, I muttered. Dennis nodded. From that moment on, she pulled away, especially from your mother, started getting closer to your dad, not out of love, but to prove something, to take control. I finally understood. Rachel hadn't just wanted power. She wanted proof that she was his, that she belonged more than I did. Even though she wasn't blood, she believed she deserved it all. And me? I was just the reminder that she didn't. The next morning, I asked Rachel to meet me. She showed up, barely. Hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes cold and red. She didn't bother sitting down. What now? She asked. I found your birth certificate. Silence. You knew, I added. You've known for years, and instead of processing it, instead of asking questions, you tried to destroy everything that didn't fit the lie. She stared at me. You think it was about money? I think it was about Dad. Her jaw clenched. He chose you in the end. I didn't argue. I just said, he loved us both, in his own messed up way. But you spent your life proving you belonged, and never once stopped to think. Maybe you always did. Maybe you didn't have to take everything from me to believe that. She looked away. For once, she didn't have a comeback. I stood. I'm not pressing charges. That got her attention. Not yet, I added. But the board knows, the auditors know, it's over. She nodded once, slow. So what now? You disappear, quietly. You keep what's left of your dignity and you don't come near this company again. She left without another word. Weeks passed, then months. The estate was finalized. The trust transferred. Rachel moved out of state. No one's heard from her since. I stayed, I showed up, I learned, I led. And somewhere along the way, the team stopped seeing me as the rebel son who inherited everything and started seeing me as a leader. I keep Mom's journal in the top drawer of my office. Sometimes I read the last page when I'm having a bad day. Legacy isn't what you take. It's what you carry forward. Give it to someone who knows what it's like to have nothing, and watch what they build. Dad gave me the company. Mom gave me the tools. But the truth? The real truth? I gave myself the chance. And when they laughed me out of the will, they didn't know they were setting the stage for something bigger than revenge. They were handing me the beginning of everything,